One thing I want to ask you about, just starting off, is about the label itself and how you decided to really start a label.
Okay. I mean, as obnoxious as it is to start this way, like I was in high school, I had like these ambitions to start a record label, and I'm in the Chicago suburbs, so still a really vibrant music scene. Like there were still a lot of really cool little local bands, and everyone supported each other, and everyone went to the same shows every weekend, and it was really cool. But you know, I was a high schooler, I didn't know what the hell I was doing. So I guess it got to a point a couple years ago. Like I had been doing the Switch Sessions, which was my music blog, and I had been writing for different magazines and websites before then, and I had all these connections to these bands and these publicists, and then I started getting chummier with people who had labels, and then I started meeting on these unsigned bands, and it just, all of a sudden, it just sort of clicked in my head. I was like, I could do this, and it wouldn't be that difficult. My wife and I really kind of do it together. She's sort of like my silent partner. I run ideas by her. She grounds me when I get all excited. And so she's really the person who just sort of keeps me in check. She's my cheerleader. But otherwise, I'm the guy with my feet on, on the pavement, talking to bands, calling, record plants and filling out paperwork and stuff. But it really just started when I realized, like how much more fun and slightly easier and it would be to start a label, and also just sort of like the opportunity was just there all of a sudden.
I really like that story. I was going to say, I used to read your blog when I was starting The Alternative, and now I'm starting I'm joining up with some other people to start like a little label. And Jetsam Flotsam was one of my sort of inspirations.
There were a lot of little labels that kind of inspired me too, and one of them was Tiny Engines. And because I was doing the switchboard sessions, and by the way, thank you for reading that website. I love hearing when people are like, "No, I totally liked it," it's because it makes me feel less like, "Oh, well, this was the biggest waste of my time ever." But I actually followed. I guess I sort of see myself as like following in some ways some other labels who did the blog to label thing. And Will was one of them from Tiny Engines and Bear Trap, because I had worked really closely with him when Bear Trap started becoming Tiny Engines. They were throwing a lot of things at the switchboard sessions. But totally. And Count Your Lucky Stars is a great label to think about too, because I interviewed them. When I interviewed Empire with a switchboard session, and they were like one of my first ones, And I remember talking to them about Count Your Lucky Stars, and they're like, we just are doing this because we want to reissue old records that aren't available anymore, and we want to keep this whole emo thing going. And this is way before like there's any thought of an actual emo revival being a popular Tumblr thing, you know what I mean? And yeah, I mean, look at what that blossomed into. It was just a guy who was like, this is music I care about. I'm just going to do this. And they're really a leader in my brain, right? I mean, like in the grand scheme of things, they're probably still small potatoes, but in my brain, they're a label that I really admire and look up to for that reason. So yeah, your idea it is following in another tradition.
The biggest thing that I think makes these smaller labels go is just that right now the big labels really aren't that intimidating at all.
Mm-hmm.
It's like when you look at the big labels now, you're just like, you guys are putting out crap. These little labels are putting out way better stuff, selling the same numbers almost in terms of vinyl and physical copies,
Yep.
So right now it's just the time to get into the smaller labels. I feel like are just growing while the bigger labels are shrinking. So it's like everyone's happy.
Well, and and this goes back to what I said. It just feels easier than ever because the veil has been lifted, and there's no reason why a little guy can't compete with the big guy. Whereas I think the same mentality existed in the 90s. But in the 90s, I guess the difference between a little label and a big label is so much bigger. It's crazy, actually. I mean, to think No Sleep Records can push out. They can sell out of 5,000 copies in 2 days. Pre-sales. Yeah, you're totally onto something there.
Yeah, I feel like the internet just allows anyone to be accessible, especially within music, because right now in music there aren't really big fish and little fish. There's just like everyone's just trying to, like, I don't know, do something, you know. So I feel like everybody's willing to at least work together to some extent to, I don't know, make cool things happen.
Yeah, and then the biggest fish, if you think of a band that's like a bigger band in our genre right now, or in the punk umbrella, right? Like, they're still humans. They're still reachable and you can talk to them. I mean, and even like someone like Evan from Into It Over It, a band like that, he's enormous, but he's a guy you just sit and talk to, and everyone knows it, and that's why I think that's part of the reason he's admired too. So I think, yeah, all the stuff that's cool about being the little guy and being, that's always been cool about punk, I think it's easier now than ever.
Yeah, dude, I definitely feel like it's definitely at least engaged me a lot more in the music. But
cool.
What do you think? One question I had was, what do you think is the most surprising thing, good or bad, when you started this label?
Okay, so let me think of like two answers there. One answer is sort of like the most true answer, but it's kind of pessimistic, and that is that fewer people are interested in buying music than you think. And for me, it's been like I'm really excited about the bands that I'm putting out. I'm really excited about the records, but you'd be surprised at how few people are as excited. And I guess I was expecting like more, 500 records to sell a lot quicker than they have, and they haven't. And that makes it sound like it's all about the money, which it's not. But the way I kind of think of it is like, I can't keep doing this unless I'm selling records, unless I can keep recycling my investment. Otherwise, it's a hobby. So that's like the more realistic answer. You would think that there are people out there clawing to get good music. Because I feel like I'm one of those people, and I'm excited about a band, I'm like, I'm gonna go and buy it. But there's not that many people out there that are like that. I think a lot more people would rather buy a record from the band, which is awesome, or they're more willing to just stream it and call it a day. And I think that's the changing world of like the demographic of punk music. Like, I'm a classroom teacher. I teach at a high school, and all of my students like just stream all of their music on Pandora or YouTube. It's like as bad as the radio. Now, the second answer is more is not surprising, although it still has some elements of surprise. And it's the more positive answer, which is everyone rallies behind you. Like, everyone. And it's so cool. And just as soon as you feel like the rallying's over, like, all of a sudden you tap a new vein of people that are like, whoa, hey, I totally dig this. I want to help you out. And you're like, so for example, like there's dudes in record labels over in Europe that are like, dude, let us stock your music over here. It'll be cheaper for people to buy it, and we'll just sell it on consignment. Or I talked to Jamie, who works with Side One Dummy, because she's got a radio show, and I said, hey, have you listened to Living Room yet? Here's the record, and she just plays it on her radio station. I mean, it's just like, again, it shouldn't be surprising, because this is how music has always been for me. Like, everyone's willing to help each other.
Yeah. On your cynical answer, I definitely feel like kind of the same way. And I think that also has a lot to do with like kind of the general economy right now in general, like I feel like more people are just like, I don't know, like scraping by, or just like not making enough money that they feel like, oh, like I got to go buy something, But,
yeah. Well, and I also think that part of this is, like I read a really great book about Merge Records, and then I read another really good book about K Records. And, like in the 90s, like college kids could scrape up $200, and they would do it super DIY style, and they'd sell them all really quickly and get enough to make the next round. And that's just how it worked. But, and record CDs are super cheap to make, like laughably cheap to make, but vinyl is not cheap to make anymore, especially if you want to do it right, especially if you want to get it. Cause I have a few records in my collection where I put them on and they just sound bad, I have so if you want to master them right, you got to do that right. And if you want to press them so that they look cool, that's not much more expensive but it's another, 60 or $70. And if you want to get the word out there, because there's so much noise on the internet, you're gonna have to pay someone to do publicity. So like, it's like it even though it's I just was talking about how it's easier than ever to start a label, but in some ways, like the vinyl revival or whatever people are calling it is also making it harder.
I definitely can. I've seen that already now that I'm starting to like look at how expensive it is to press vinyl, and I'm like, wait, like where is the profit margin? You know what I mean? It's like, and I feel like I feel like how music is right now, like the costs are so low, but the amount that you can sell is also not ever going to be that huge. So it's like everyone is just like, well, as long as I can keep making my costs, like I can keep the label open, I can keep the venue going, So what would you say was the I guess you kind of went into it with the most surprising thing, but what was the most difficult thing about starting a label yourself?
I'll give you another answer, because I do think so far the most difficult thing has been it has been not having a lot of money coming back at you. And I'm willing to accept that this might be a hobby that I have the rest of my life, not a business. Just, some people spend, I've said this before to other people, but some people spend, $5,000 on a cruise. Some people drop $3,000 on a weekend in, like in Italy, and I'm going to drop, $2,500 on a record, and so I guess that was one thing that was challenging. Here's the better answer though, and plays into that. Better answer is finding so much music and not being able to say, get over here, let me put out your record. Like right now, there have been 2 or 3 records that I've been on the phone where I've really been excited about it, but I've had to say, dude, we don't have the money. I have no idea how we could put it out. So really, it's been about picking the right bands at the right time and the timing all kind of working out. And on that note, then, another challenging thing has been being excited about a band, being able to accept my music taste as eclectic, and saying okay, this is totally going to sell. And this weirder thing that I like is not going to sell. So I need to, and that's not to say how do you put this without sounding like a douche? You sort of have to pick and choose the bands that are willing to work hard, the bands that are willing to tour, they're willing to do pride, or that they're hustling. And by the way, this is what I love about Big Awesome as a band is Colin hustles, man. And he just knows everyone and is willing to work with everyone, and that's the kind of thing I try to choose in a band. So it's partially being so excited that you can't even contain yourself, and your wife will have to say, no, wait a minute, hold on. And on the other hand, saying, well, wait, is this band really going to work that hard to help us put out their next record? So that's been challenging. It's been a fun challenge. It's fun to say, oh my gosh, I love this band. Henrietta is a good example of that, because I was chummy with Henrietta, and I wrote one of their bios, and I was talking back and forth with Colin. I said, Colin, let me put out this record, dude. And he's like, okay, we'll consider you. And then he's like, no, Matt from Animal Styles come back at us. I was like, duh! You know what I mean? And Animal Styles is the perfect label for them. You know what I mean? But yeah, it's fun.
It is a little bit of a risk, and you never know. The band could break up right away after you put it out.
Definitely know that one.
Yeah,
and that stinks, but it's also one of the risks. It's just part of a business. Yeah. I think that's part of the fun too. If it was a sure thing, then there would be something lost there. I feel like there's some fun that comes along with saying, okay, you guys are a new band, we're kind of a new label, maybe we can help each other out. I'm willing to take a risk on you if you're willing to take a risk on me. And that's actually how all 3 of our records so far have gone. So
awesome. So one question I have about Big Awesome, who we talked about a little before, is what's the details on that record? I mean, you probably can't announce when it's coming out, but has it been hard to get the album pressed and ready to go?
Yeah. The story with that one is more or less this. I've been chummy with Colin for a while. In fact, my relationship with Big Awesome started when Big Awesome started working publicity with Bear Trap, And I've been writing bios for Bear Trap for a long time, and I think it was Will who passed them my way and said, you would probably really like this band. So I wrote the bio for Bird Feeder, and then it went out to all of these press outlets, and a lot of people really liked it. And so then a few years later, Colin wanted Henrietta to have a bio, and he's like, Will said you wrote it, and we want the same thing. I'm like, okay, dude, let's do it. And so I did Henrietta's bio for before they even got signed to Animal Style. They were like soliciting the record, and they wanted a bio done out with it. And then Colin and I were sort of like going back and forth, and I was emailing him saying, hey, I started this record label. I probably put out Henrietta's record, and I definitely would big awesome record. And he's like, whoa, cool, man, we're totally doing this. And it just sort of, if you ever heard Colin talk about it, it makes it sound like the stars just aligned and that magic happened, and it's just sort of like you knew it was meant to be. And that's how I think he sees it. For me, it's just like, I think I got lucky, For him, it's like, oh, the stars aligned and the right guy came around. And for me, I'm like, holy shit, I need to make sure Big Awesome puts out the record with me instead of them. So, like, that's, like, how things got rolling. They recorded, like, they had the record done, I think, over the summer. By the end of the summer, we had, and I also said, we were expecting a baby too, and I said, we got to wait until my second kid's born, because I don't want him to be super sick and then have to use that money on something else. Everything worked out, and we got the record sent off, and we got it mastered, and then we sent it to the factory. That was all in, like, October, and then we sent it to the plant, and the plant is overloaded with other records. I got the test presses yesterday, but I think the plant got things in November. You know what I mean? And usually it's not that long. Once they get stuff, usually they're supposed to get test presses run pretty quickly. But it took 2 months. We've got, we're doing some crazy variants. Like, we're doing one I don't even know how it's going to turn out. It's like white and orange and blue splatter. It's just going to be like a big tie-dye mess. And I think it's going to be really cool. But we don't really have a release date because I would hate to say April, and then the records not show up until May or June, and then I hate when labels do that. I just hate it, and I know we had to push it back a week with Living Room's record, and I don't want to do that again. So I'm going to try to take baby steps a little bit more this time. Yeah,
but all right. So I guess really just one last question for you, which is, what is your personal music taste like? Label aside, what do you like to listen to?
The easy answer is punk music, punk rock, and but obviously that doesn't mean anything because that label means nothing. So I guess what I mean is, like, I really like a lot of rock music, and almost anything that could be labeled as rock music. The foundation of my taste really started with the Smashing Pumpkins, with the Foo Fighters, Veruca Salt. Different cool rock bands that were on the radio in 1998, and when I got into punk, it was a lot of skate punk. It was like Lagwagon and No Youth for a Name, anything on Fat Records at the time, but also like the Vandals and old AFI and stuff. That was the stuff that my friends were really into, and eventually I got into. I had a ska streak. I still am a staunch supporter of ska. So that started with Real Big Fish. But then I went backwards with the Specials and other bands like in the 80s, and then going forward I got into weird ska-core stuff, and I was really into Big D and the Kids Table, and I think though there's a person in me that really like nowadays the stuff that really gets me going is big sounding stuff. So it needs to feel independent to me, and it needs to feel not punk, not Mohawk punk, but it needs to feel like authentic and truthful and honest, which is why I love Living Room and why Jetsam Flotsam's first full length needed to be Living Room because that record to me is just big and kicks you in the face, and I like big sounding records. So for Christmas I got Russian Cynical's most recent record, and they're a big band for me. And when I think of the music that I'm most into, and the labels that I'm most into, it's either punk music that just sort of like has a lot of energy, or it's post-hardcore emo stuff that just feels dense But I really do like the newer emo stuff. Before people started calling it emo, like even, whatever people call it. Like, I like You Blew It a lot. I like, I really am into, like stuff on Count Your Lucky Stars, and I don't know. I'm all over the place. Yeah. I like Baroness and like doomy sludge metal kind of stuff sometimes. I like pop punk. I mean, I like the Wonder Years, but I also like pop punk, like the Copyrights. And I don't know. I guess, and I like indie music. Shit. See, this is too hard of a question. Yeah. Like, you saved the hardest one for last. Yeah, right. Like, I liked Always' record. The thing for me, though, is the thread that, whether it's a Murder by Death record or a Cave-In record. And one of my favorite bands of all time is Oingo Boingo. And they're a weird 80s new wave band that had all sorts of ska, but all sorts of, synth stuff going on. Danny Elfman does all the soundtracks to every movie now. The thing that threads all of those bands, that to me is the most, and is the difference between a band that I like and like Memphis May Fire, is the honesty that kind of goes through the music. And I think there's, someone who's going to say like Memphis May Fire is a truly honest band, or like Ronnie Radke is like he bears his soul as a musician. But I think that's all bull. Like, if I can't tell that these guys like care about what they're doing and just are exuding truth in their music, then I don't want to listen to it. Yeah. I guess that's the longest-winded answer ever, but yeah, I like honest music.
That's something that I definitely listen for, though, because like you can tell when a band's writing a song and they feel it and they're writing music for them.
And they just go out there and say, fuck it, man, I'm just going to put on my guitar and play. Like, that's the stuff that every time is going to make me tear up.
All right, well, I had a great time talking to you, man. I got to run, but feel free to hit me up with label questions and legal stuff, because I'm going to be sending some questions your way for sure.
Yeah.